What is the worst interview question you have ever been asked?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Future?
A design myth you are tired of hearing.
That design is about making things look pretty.
One trait a designer should avoid having.
Fear of failure.
Hey Garrett, welcome to my show. Our audience would love to hear about your personal life. Let's start with that.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. It's always good to reconnect with former colleagues, and we had a pleasure working together at Hinge Health and really establishing the team in Bangalore and San Francisco together. So it's great to be reconnected. A little bit about me and my personal life, maybe a little bit about my hobbies. I love to stay connected and creative in both my kitchen. I love doing a lot of cooking, learning. It's where I really stay curious about different ingredients and different practices. And then also just in my garden too. I love to see things grow and flourish with a little bit of seeds and things that you can start and see it to completion. So a little bit about me that people may not know there. It's a little interesting tidbit.
I also know about your fishing skills. You told me about your fishing skills when we were together in the Bangalore office.
Yeah, so I don't know if I would say it's skills per se, but an interest that kind of run through my family as well as now my son, who's 8, is also taking interest, but it kind of stems from my grandfather. I currently live in Seattle, Washington. It's where I was born and raised, and my grandpa would go up every year to Alaska and go fishing. So one of the holidays here in the U.S. is July 4th. It's the founding kind of birthday of America. And what we did as a family is we would my grandfather would go up to Alaska, catch a giant salmon, and then bring it back, and we'd have a big feast together based off of the fish. So I got kind of introduced into that area. I had an opportunity to go up with him one of the years and caught salmon and halibut. Now my son, who's 8, is liking fishing with him as well. So it's a multiple generational hobby.
So there is a famous statement I had from a design conference. It says that no parents ask their children to become a designer. I don't know about you, but it's completely true for my case. So I'm curious to know how you became a designer. Why did you choose design as your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, I don't even know if my parents even knew what design was. So I think that was to let alone say like become a designer, we didn't even know what it was. I mean, especially back then, user experience design, industrial design, design was really kind of nascent in its beginning. And so how do I choose? I think it was really getting into I just loved products and product design. I loved cars and vehicles and shoes, and maybe being so close to Nike here in the Pacific Northwest and Seattle may had some influence in that. But yeah, my early kind of design career started in industrial design. So that was really around designing products from the hardware. And then my path went into more traditional UX from my education at Savannah College of Art and Design, where product design was really viewed as holistic. Why would you want this product in someone's life versus designing and building for materials and manufacturing? And so that then led into like what type of user problems are we solving for? How could you see this envisioning improving someone's life in their design journey or in their user journey? And then naturally that kind of went into product design because there was a big boom, or UX design because there was a big boom in iOS and apps and so forth. So that's how I got into design really early on, was just kind of really interested in products that are around me and things that I use.
In the last one decade of my career, I have seen good amount of design evolutions happening in the industry. When you look at it, how do you see the design evolutions?
I think the design evolution has kind of matched what's happening in the market. And so, there, early on in my career at least, there was a huge boom of growth of new innovation ideas. I mean, this when I go back in my own career was things like designing the first e-reader or spending time in an R&D center that at Samsung. And the idea was really around if you can dream it, then you can build it. That was the mentality, and especially around the digital resolution revolution of coming into making everything connected. And so that you could look at your entire house and be like, what things could be connected and what things could improve by the internet. And so that then since has kind of transitioned into this more efficient model around efficiency and quality. It's have we reached market saturation with our current technology set that we have? And then how do we make that better? And then how do we make that more efficient in delivery? And so you can kind of see that in design as well. It's less about um, continual flow of innovation. It's more about when do you have the right moments for innovation? When do you spend dedicated time for that? But then also let's balance that with more efficient practices as well as ensuring that the things that we are doing meet the problems, the solutions meet the problems that we have, as well as uphold a high quality bar.
That's very interesting. For any designer, there is always a dilemma between creativity and business. So, how do you personally balance fostering creativity while keeping the strategic business goals in mind?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit about this in the last question, but it was now it's really around understanding when to have and foster creativity versus when to keep delivery. And so I still run under the mindset of, and one of the core tenets that I have is paint the future, deliver today. So you still need to be able to, as a design group, paint and understand where are we going in the future. We as creatives and designers are really uniquely able and suited to use our skills in design to paint the future in a way, to envision what it could be, to foster a lot of the creative conversations. But we also have a responsibility to also deliver today. So for me, it's around when we talk about balance, it's really looking at the seasonality of the company and the culture. So what I mean by that is every culture or every company has its own product development cycle. Sometimes they're reacting on a 2 week basis. Sometimes they're going on quarterly results. Sometimes they're doing on half yearly objectives, and it shifts. But having a pulse of understanding, like when those major milestones are, and then using design in the right time and the right place to right leverage and influence those milestones will help. So, for example, if you are just about to create company-wide objectives for 2025, now would be the time to start looking at what are some creative, innovative ideas of what we could do by the end of 2025 to help inform what those roadmaps are. But if you're at the last end of a quarter, like Q2, right before a big launch event, that would be the absolute wrong time to be focused on innovative design sprints. You should be focused on delivering that today and so, validating some of those ideas that you've had.
For anyone who wants to land in the leadership position for product design, there is always a confusion about which leadership style to follow. There is so many leadership styles. There is laissez free, situational, transactional, authoritarian. So, in your opinion, which leadership style is the ideal one for the current situation?
I think this kind of maybe requires a little bit of breakdown in terms of what product design leader is today. To me, there's really two types of different leaders, and both of them don't create a hierarchical aspect. So, for example, there is a product design people leader. Those are people who are typically your directors or VPs, handling a lot of the skill sets around strategic direction, the bandwidth and resource allocation, and really their jobs is to help empower their design teams to deliver and do the best work that they can do. But then there's also product design leaders who are individual contributors. And to me, those are really, really important to the company. Just because there is an organizational hierarchy doesn't necessarily mean that they're not leaders in the company. And those people are the ones who are solely responsible for delivering on the strategic initiatives. And so my role as a people leader, and how I view right now the ideal leadership is to help set up and create the right environments for those product design individual contributor leaders to do their best work. And this really hasn't changed from how I view from my early career. When I was first starting out, I actually taught at Purdue University. I taught 3 years there. And I approach management in that same fashion, just like you would in a university setting where everyone is very optimistic about the future. They're very inspired. They have wide open ideas because they haven't had the weight of the constraints yet. Of technical constraints or business constraints, they're very free flowing and creative ideas. I like to instill that same type of environment within inside my design culture. And just like a teacher, they create a syllabus, they create a structured plan, they create accountable, or they create kind of deadlines to create accountability. And my job is to help the designers go through and navigate through those. And when they need help, help them through the assignments. But my job is to really help set that environment up. And so I really view that as like a teaching philosophy, and that may be turned into like a servant leader per se, but I really lean into that teaching background and really truly believe any manager or any product design leader needs to embrace that.
In the last 1 decade, there has been a bunch of design trends. For example, the flat design system from Microsoft, the skeuomorphism from Apple. Recently, we used neomorphism as well. According to you, which design trend is the most exciting and impactful for the future?
I think the most exciting that I have is the impacts of AI and as it relates to trends. And so right now, things are changing so fast. And AI is only going to fuel that even further. And so with the impact of AI, you can see a lot of the trends right now in product development based off of the capabilities of the current tool sets and technology. So what I mean by that is you're seeing a lot of chat interfaces, you're seeing a lot of generative artwork being produced. I don't believe that has quite landed in terms of a trend, in terms of how it can be leveraged, because the tool itself is evolving and technology itself is evolving so quickly. So that's what I find really exciting is right now it feels like we are in a very, as designers, we're in a very early days of how to leverage the tools to set new trends. And so when I think of that, I can think of like, how do you adapt it instead of one single style, but how do you adapt it so quickly to different environments and contexts? Or how do you make your experience so personalized to you that resonates based off of generating off of the AI and different inputs and data that you have? So to me, that's what I find very exciting around the impact of AI and where that's going.
One of the leadership principles followed by multiple companies is the diversity and inclusion, which is great. But when we follow the diversity and inclusion, there is always a problem of different communication styles. When people from different countries and cultures with different communication styles work in a team, there can be a problem of communication gap as well. So, how do you manage the different challenges that arise from different communication styles within your team?
Yeah, I would maybe go a little deeper in this as well, is that communication is the top surface layer where it manifests. This may be the output, but really trying to understand the cultural impacts of specific team locales and that make up who those, how they navigate the world. How do they navigate ambiguity? How do they resolve conflict? All of these are different from people to people and also region to region. In the United States, for example, someone how they navigate conflict in the East Coast, for example, in New York City versus in Seattle is going to be very different. That's completely true as well, obviously, in India versus the US, or in my time also in Korea as well. And so, as a people manager, one of the important things is spending time with the team to really understand the cultural differences, so that you can help them navigate through it. Um, that's one thing. So, for example, in working in Korea, hierarchy, especially in management, was extremely sensitive. And so, understanding that and understanding how the teams in the US were leveraged, as well as understanding that you can't just take designs or design reviews straight to the top. You have to work through the management layers and create almost a cohesion buy-in. That's very different than in the US, especially in Silicon Valley, of how you can just create an idea and go straight to the founder or to the CEO. So having those understandings, but then also, our time in when I visited you in India as well, really understanding one of the stories that I always say is as I visited, you have India, kind of just the culture and the infrastructure that has been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of old, with the biggest population in the world. And so you have a infrastructure, roads, for example, that aren't suited for the amount of population for efficiency purposes. You may see very cleanly and orderly, efficient processes. But what's amazing is that the people in Bangalore and in India can get things done in the way that best suited for them, and it works, and it's pretty amazing to see. And that type of takeaway can see that I really view as a strength, that I had and leverage of the India team as well. It's like it can be very kind of hard to navigate in a business and work practice, but at the same time, the design team was able to get things done. Maybe that's pure grit, or just the use and kind of normalcy of trying to navigate from point A to point B and many different roadblocks and challenges. So that's one area in terms of cultural sensitivity and just understanding. But in terms of communication, and this is less about style, but one of the things that I really encourage the design team is really try to get to clarity of thought. And one of the ways to do that is encourage writing as a method, and write it down. So sometimes our verbal speech may be not as clear. And sometimes that's not as clear in our heads as we're speaking it as well. But if you take just a moment to write things down, it could be in your native language as well, write things down and then translate it, or then have it read, that typically helps you to create more clarity in terms of what you're trying to communicate. And with that clarity comes better communication.
Interesting. I actually wanted to follow up on that. So I recently read a book called Crisis as a Catalyst by Mr. Ranbir Roy. In that book, there is a story about Sundar Pichai. When he was running the Google Chrome project, the problems of different communication style was there, and he came up with a kind of communication protocol or some kind of a framework to address these issues. So do you think that we can come up with some kind of a communication protocol or framework to address the challenges of different communication styles within the team?
For sure. I mean, in some of this framework, I haven't read the book, but in creating frameworks, and part of that is to create the clarity, right? It's to try to see like what information do I know? What information do I not know? What questions do I need to go get or answers to? That in itself is a framework to try to go and deliver. And so, in the same way of trying to understand in terms of communication, trying to understand what things need to be acted on now, what things are noise, things like that. There's a bunch of frameworks that can go through and leverage, but I think in all of the essence there is trying to create, trying to get to the clarity and what you're trying to communicate as its core versus all the other things that surround what you're trying to describe.
Well, all of us had our ups and downs in our career. We have seen the pandemic, recessions as well. And we need to be tough and motivating the team during these times. especially when there is an ambiguity and when the top management is not giving clear visionary statement or motivational speech. So as a leader, how do you motivate your teammate during the tough times?
I think, one of the kind of another principles that I follow is just learn and be curious. And for that, it's asking questions, and I take it upon myself to be like, what if we could do that? What if this could be, what would this enable? And just be generally curious about the future direction of where it could go. And typically throughout those conversations, you start to get creative, especially with product designers, you start to get kind of this creativity really flowing. And so, as a manager, really being curious about and diving deep into like, what are they working on? What are they solving? What could be different? And really encouraging the team to take an approach when they're coming up with solutions, not just on delivery, what we could do now, but where is this going to lead in the future? Or what is a wild and wacky idea that maybe contrasts that may lead to something that's really inspiring and different. The second thing is don't forget to celebrate the small wins. And those small wins can be exciting. They can also just be really impactful for our users as well. There's many times, as an example, when I was working on Alexa product, where we'd work on a very small product, like a small use case. In this case, it was Alexa Help. You could use Alexa to call a emergency contact as an example. Now, it's obviously in terms of daily active users or monthly active users, you're not really wanting to have users call for help all the time, right? So from a purely metric perspective, it was very, very, very small. But you can find and celebrate the stories in which how you're helping users really overcome whatever they were trying, whatever emergency they were in, and that in itself was exciting and motivating for others. And at Hinge Health, we have lots of those as well, especially within the medical and health industry, right? Lots of things within new programs, or lots of things helping coaches as well as our PTs on just small wins. If I can help, as an example, if I can help through a design to help make it faster for people to have direct communication when someone is in pain, that's going to be a huge win because you're ultimately helping the user. And so trying to spotlight those, especially in tough times, is super important, but it must be elevated to help keep motivation and really validation on why you're here and what you're doing.
Well, after the pandemic, the remote working became a common thing. But that also comes with challenges like visibility of work. For example, you are managing a team in India from US. In that case, how do you make sure that you are clearly assessing the skills of your team in India and making sure that their performance is clearly visible to you?
So visibility and analyzing skills and performance, I personally believe should be separated. I think just having people in the office and counting that as performance is just pure laziness on the manager's perspective. And part of that is you can be visible, you can be in the office and not do anything. Should they say that then you're performing just because I see you? It's a very biased approach because there may be someone who is in the office who is not visible. They may come in early and stay late and work a lot and deliver a lot, but you're not part of their corner or they're part of their universe. And so just because you see them doesn't necessarily mean they're performing. And so I say that in a sense of yes, COVID and remote culture has changed, but I also view whether you're in person or whether you're virtual, it's not just one evaluation or whether you're visible or not. You need to create, as a people manager, recurring mechanisms throughout the year to check in. You need to hold the team accountable for the things that you're working on, whatever the goals are, and then work towards that and check in on a quarterly basis to see, are you meeting that? Are you not meeting it? Where is your skills strengths, and where are your weaknesses, and how do you overcome those weaknesses? And so for me, that's how you do a lot of analyzing the skills and performance of the direct reports, is having that open communication and those mechanisms across. Now, with visibility, I understand part of the visible aspect, and this shouldn't be from your my direct reports, but when you start to put people up for performance reviews, where you need to get uh, uh, sign off from leadership, or you need to get support from peers who are at a higher level, as an example, that's when visibility needs to really come in and play. That comes from making sure that the manager that you're working for is setting you up right. Are you in the right meetings? Are you on the right projects? And are you working strategically on the right things as a partner to demonstrate that you are actually um, uh, have the skills and performing on what you're delivering on. And so that's where the visibility comes from. It shouldn't be a visible that you're in the office or if you're at home or whatever. It's really, are you collaborating with the right people? Do you have stretch goals that can help you grow? And then are there areas in which you can overcome some of your weaknesses as well?
So there are extroverts and introverts in the team, and extroverts are very good at over communicating. And they have an advantage of standing out from the crowd, especially when the work is done remotely. So, how do you manage to give enough attention to introverts also when they have done a great job?
So first, in those performance, depending on style, right? Whether you're extroverted or introverted, loud, quiet, like anyway, you need to find ways to capture and document the work that you are doing. Okay. So sometimes for an extroverted in the loud, it's known because they're shouting at the top of the mountain, this is what I'm doing. And then you can validate whether or not they're doing it or not. When you have someone who is introverted and quiet, and they may be working kind of independently on their desk, you still need to understand what are they working on, and capture that. You don't need to shout it loudly to others, but you do need to capture in a document or a goals document or whatever mechanism that the management team uses, but capture all the things you are doing so it does create visibility up to the work that you're doing. That needs to be captured for both.
As per your experience working with designers from India and US, do you see any differences?
I think when I reflect back, some of it has to do with ambiguity tolerance. So, what I mean by that is, and some of this is how design has evolved from the US versus how it has evolved and been invested in India. So, for example, some of this is like design maturity as well. So in the US, it's expected for designers to kind of uh, come up with solutions that may break the process, or make kind of shortcut into something, and take in inspiration and create a presentation and then go straight to the top, as an example. In India, there has been a more focus on execution historically, on execution and executing really well. And so with execution, you need to have solid type requirements, deliver against those requirements, and your job as a designer is to design against those. So there's a little bit of a difference of, like, maybe I would say, actually speaking out loud, a little bit of role blurring. Like in the US, there's a little bit of like wear multiple hats. A designer might take on a little bit of product management, they might take on a little bit of engineering, versus in India, what I found in my experience is very kind of dedicated to the specific discipline and delivering designs against what product is giving versus what the type of constraints are.
So the next question is very interesting for me. One of my previous managers was from a visual design background. and he was not able to give proper verbal feedback. So he used to take our design files and make modifications and show to us and say that this is what I wanted. So when you are working with your direct reports and when they are not understanding your verbal feedback, how do you manage that situation?
I think the way in which your former manager did is trying to find other ways to communicate. So if verbal communication isn't working, if written communication isn't working, finding things like sketching is another way of communicating as well. The difference, though, that I would say, and I would not encourage the practice of what your manager, former manager, was doing. I would say it's more of a suggestion, not this is what I want. And how I've done it is, even if I am sketching, it's trying to open kind of the peripherals of what is possible in different solutions. So not as like, I want it this way, now go execute on this. It's have you considered this? Because ultimately you are the expert, the subject matter expert in your specific area, domain, pod of your specific organization. And I, as a manager, am not able to cross-reference all the considerations because I'm just simply not in all of the conversations. But my job is to help trying to expand the peripherals on like what is possible and connect the dots into other things that I am seeing. And so sketching as a consideration, as a way, a source of inspiration is definitely something that can be leveraged.
So there can be situations like one designer in your team who's extremely good at work, but showing receptiveness to feedback and being rude to your stakeholders. So how do you manage that kind of situation?
So as a manager, you need to capture a lot of these things. You need to capture, document, understand, again, try to find clarity in communicating and why. Why are they not receptive to it? And then start to get, if they continue to start not being receptive to it, then starting to get different feedback from cross functional partners as well. So if your perspective is not resonating, also leveraging, okay, well, this is valid because I'm also getting the same feedback from your product manager. I'm getting it from your leadership. I'm getting it from your engineering partners as well. And so when you start to validate these are the conflicts that are arising, and then the employee is still not receptive to that change or making efforts to change, then you need to start questioning whether or not they are a good fit for the company culture, as well as just how we operate at a specific company. And typically that goes into some sort of performance plan that then has very clear expectations for the employee and relationship with the employer on what's expected from that role. And ultimately, hopefully, it's always encouraging to try to get that employee to navigate through that to help and overcome on the other side so they can start to understand those differences. But sometimes it doesn't work out as well.
Well, the next question is about a hot topic in all the design conferences, seat at the table. What designers or design team can do to get a seat at the table when there is a company vision or product roadmap planning is happening?
So we need to double down on what design brings to the table as the first thing, right? Have an understanding of what design offers to the rest of the business and how it can help alleviate whatever type of challenge that they may be working through. That's the first step. Then the second step would be to understand the language in which is being spoken at the table. Typically, in my experience, that has been a lot around what is the business strategy. And so needing to understand how is the billing models, how is the company earning money, as well as what are some of the conflicts in which they're having with user engagement or retention or whatever that may be that the company is going through. So having the same vocabulary and understanding of what challenges are happening at a very strategic business level, then understanding what design can do to help alleviate and overcome some of those challenges to bring to the table. That can be very powerful, but you have to have both of those connections, an understanding of how to talk, as well as an understanding of the challenges, as well as an understanding of design that can help bring to that as a solution.
I just want to follow up on that. There is a famous comment I heard from a design conference as well. To get a seat at the table, you need to be in the room first. Many designers have a habit of skipping meetings, telling that it's very technical and they have nothing to contribute in it. Do you think designers need to be in more meetings to get a seat at the table?
Yes, of course. I mean, that kind of goes back to the vocabulary aspect of what's being talked about. If you have a mindset of like, so maybe step back a little bit. I'm not expecting designers to emulate an engineer, right? Or to emulate a product manager. So when you're in a stand up, for example, or if you're an engineering technical deep dive, the expectation isn't to be like, okay, you understand how it's being built, what's the code, what's the kind of path forward based off of the technical constraints. That is solely within inside the engineering's background. However, I do expect to understand generally what is the constraints and help use your own skill sets as a designer to help overcome and see where they're wanting to go. So, for example, if the technical platform is built in a certain way, you don't need to know how it's built, but you need to know how it's built in that certain way, like what code is being used. You need to know what are the limitations and enablers that how it's currently being built, the environment is built, is allowing and creating the user outcomes. Then you can use design to say, well, what if we did this, or if we kept it in the same platform, this is how it would manifest. But if we changed it this way, would this be possible? Now you're starting to use design as your core skill set to envision what the future possibility could be and help inform those conversations from an engineering perspective to change the platform capabilities to meet the actual outcomes that are desired from a company.
Awesome. Okay, Garrett, now we are entering into a rapid fire round where I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions one after the other, and you need to answer the questions as soon as possible, even without thinking.
Let's go.
Okay, let's start with this. How do you define design in one sentence?
Design is the purest expression of intention. It's about stripping away everything unnecessary until the truth remains.
A popular design loved by many, which you think is overrated.
Say minimalism for when it's done just for the sake of minimalism. And generally, it can be like listening to a song without any of its soul. It's been taken out, it's clean, it's too empty. So, how do you still have that soul within inside the design?
What is the worst interview question you have ever been asked?
I really don't like being forecast into like, where do you see yourself in 5 years future? It's really about the process, and you really don't really know what's going to happen until you start embarking in that process.
A design myth you are tired of hearing.
The design is about making things look pretty. Design is about the resonance, about evoking something deeper than its appearances.
One trait a designer should avoid having.
Fear of failure. If you're not willing to go too far, you'll never know where you can go.
If you are not in design, which field would you be in?
Definitely food. I mentioned this at the top of the call here, but food, like design, it's about crafting an experience that connects people at a very visceral level. And both are about balance and creativity and making something greater with the sum of its parts.
What is the worst design advice you have ever received?
Oh, ever. This might be controversial. I don't know if it's ever, but I would say follow the data. Definitely data can guide, but it should never lead. Design comes from intuition, from the feeling, the emotive aspect. So numbers are a really great way to validate what your gut already knows.
Awesome! Congratulations, Garrett, for completing the rapid fire round successfully. Before we wrap it up, could you please tell the audience how they can reach out to you?
Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a message with definitely a personal note. That always helps filter out the connection requests. So if you say, "Hey, I listened to this podcast," or "I've got in contact with Praveen and have a few questions," add me on LinkedIn with that note. That helps me understand where we're connected from.
Okay, great. Now we are at the end of this episode, and I'm definitely sure there are a bunch of takeaways from this episode. And it was a great pleasure having you here, Garrett. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. It was great reconnecting and chatting about design.